So now let's turn our attention to some important terminology that we can begin to construct and add to this idea of running simulations. Now we've talked about this kind of large group and this small group in the past several videos, in that in statistics we're trying to ask questions about a large group of individuals or people, and we try to answer that question by looking at this small group. Well, to help kind of illustrate this, we have these different pieces of terminology here. So I'm going to go ahead and start by seeing that when we talk about a population, that is that large group, the entire group of responses or measurements or outcomes that are being studied. So when I think about a population, I'm thinking about this kind of overall large group of individuals, like this big red circle. And in there, I have a lot of different individuals. So I can imagine individuals as like these little X's. An individual is exactly what it sounds like. Like if I said, get an individual friend's name, right? Like that would be a single friend of yours, and you'd state their name. You know, get an individual chip out of the bin. Let's go grab one chip. So an individual is just a single thing that you're measuring. A single chip, a single car, a single blanket, a single pen. You know, it could be really anything. But when we have these individuals, they make up a population. Again, don't treat this like it's a math class. Just think about the way you would normally use these words. Countries have populations, and those populations are composed of individuals. Now, what we do in statistics, again, is we try to ask a question about the overall large group. And we do that by taking what we call a sample. A sample is a subset of the population, meaning it's a small group of some of the individuals from the population. So that creates a sample. So this picture over here helps to kind of at least illustrate that point. But down in example number 2, we'll see that we can also try to identify populations and samples in a lot of different scenarios. So let's take a look here. If we were to go back to example number 1, we know that there was a population of items that we were studying. These were the chips that were in the bin. So notice my population here would be all 100,000 chips in the bin made by the machine. Right? I mean, this was the set of objects that we were interested in knowing something about. Specifically on that problem, what we wanted to know is if half of them were going to be red and half were going to be blue. Now, of course, we didn't look at all 100,000 chips to make that determination because that would have been, way too much work. So instead, we took a little blue sample. We took a handful of individual chips and we created a sample out of it. So, do you remember how big the sample was? Well, if you went back and looked at it, the sample was the 16 chips that were selected, right? So I can see here that I have in the population, all is a really key important buzzword, all of the chips in the bin. But when I get down to the sample, I'm just talking about some of the chips, right? Not all, just some. Let's take a look at some of these other questions here and see if maybe you can come up with some ideas. Part B. A company is concerned about the quality of the products that they have produced in the past year. To try and determine the quality, they look at 50 products from each month from the previous year. So like 50 in January, 50 in February, 50 in March, so on and so forth. And they assess their quality. So again, maybe this company produces a whole bunch of different items. I don't know what these are, right? They're just some product. But we want to assess the quality of all the products. So our population would be all the products produced in the last year. Right? I mean, isn't this exactly what that first sentence says? A company is concerned about the quality of the products they have produced in the last year. So we're going to go look at all of the products produced in the last year. Okay, so again, notice that buzzword of all is popping up again when I talk about population. Now when we look at the sample is which of the objects did we actually go look at? Okay, well the sample then would be the 50 products from each month that were selected. Right? We only took some of the objects. Technically here, I guess 50 times 12, right? Since we did 50 every month. So I think that'd be, I don't know, what is that, like 600? Right? So these are going to be my population and sample here. Take a look at part C. I'm going to ask you right now to do something that we'll do fairly frequently throughout our lecture videos here, which is, can you go ahead and actually pause the video at this point and see if you can answer part C on your own? Then when you hit unpause, you can see me work through the solutions. All right, so hopefully you actually did attempt that and came up with some of the following wording. Now your wording doesn't have to match perfectly with mine, but it should communicate the same idea. There are no magical words in statistics. There are ideas that you attempt to communicate. So let's see. A sociologist attempts to study the college completion rates for all children that come from broken homes. Okay, so I'm interested in knowing something about all children from broken homes. That is who I am going to study. So all the children. Now when I go to the sample, I see that this says to do this, he or she looks at the academic records of 10,000 children that come from broken homes. So I'll say the 10,000 children whose academic records were obtained. Okay. Again, you may not have used that exact same wording, but that's okay. Were you still talking about all the children and the 10,000 children? If you were, then you're good. Okay? Now, what we can kind of see here is that both the population and the sample are both kind of who questions, right? When I'm asking about both of these, this is really a question about who or what am I studying? And so if you keep that in mind, this will make things a lot easier when we start to add additional pieces of terminology a little bit later.